Okay, well, we're back at it again today. After I turned the camera off last night, I was remembering some parts that I had ordered that I didn't remember seeing. So I checked back through my receipts, and sure enough, there were some parts that I'd ordered that was not here. So I spent the morning running back to the dealership and getting those parts picked back up. They had them, they just misplaced them on the shelf. So no harm, no foul. But the other two parts that I'm changing out is the fuel filter and the wrist pin clips. Those are OEM, all that's OEM, but there's the part number for the fuel filter and the part number for the retaining clips. And while I was there, I went ahead, because I had forgotten to order it, but I went ahead and picked up an OEM wrist pin to put in this thing. These are just a few more of the parts I feel that would benefit this saw from upgrading to. So what I'm gonna start on for today is, let's get the oil pump put in. Okay, so like I mentioned before, I'm using a high volume oil pump, Farmertec brand. We'll get it opened up. Okay, here's the high output oil pump for that. We will need, in that bag that the anti-vibration bushings were in, there's also another seal in here. It's a real tiny seal. There it is. So that little seal right there, don't forget, it's going to go right down in here, and on the back side of the oil pump, it'll go right here. That's what seals the oil pump up. So let me put these to the side, put these parts back up so I don't get everything mixed up and confused. So we also need two of the oil pump bolts. They are M4 by 12 millimeter. I believe these are them. Let me just double check. 12 millimeter M4s, so two of those. And the oil pump will be ready to install, almost. This gear, I want to go ahead and put a little grease on this thing and make sure everything spins freely. At the bottom there, that's your adjustment for how much you want this thing to oil. Okay, so that's got grease. Put a little around where the seal's going to go. Okay, that seal's in there. I did put a little grease on it as well. Okay, I actually misspoke just a second ago. The oil pump, that goes in that oil line that we previously installed. The seal will seal up against here. So, anyways, so you know, so I'll put a little bit of grease around that seal as well. And also with the oil pump comes this little rubber plug that will actually go in the side of the oil pump here, just like that. It's got some little ribs you can see here and here, same with on that, so it just slides together and kind of indents itself where it's supposed to go. So the only other thing we need for this now is the worm gear, which I've got right here. That is the part number for it, for the OEM, if you want to use it. That's it. I'll put a little grease on these threads and assemble that into the oil pump. Okay, so here's the oil pump. The worm gear goes in like this, and it is installed. Don't lose your little rubber bushing. So that fits in there, worm gear's in, everything's greased. Got our seal in there. And this will just sit straight down over the shaft and into there. Okay. Okay, once you got the oil pump in and everything's seated like it should be, it does say in the manual that the 2 screws that it takes to put a sealant on them. So I'm going to use that same Moto seal, put it on the threads, and then we'll put them in and tighten them up. And the torque on these is 3 Newton meters, so not much at all. My torque wrench actually only goes down to 5 Newton meters, so it's going to be just a little bit. It's a fairly small bolt, so you don't want to break it. Okay, so for the next step, we're gonna need 4 P6 by 19 self-tapping screws and 1 M5 by 16 screw, which I think it's in this package. It is, okay. And we will need the impulse line. So, impulse line, screws, self-tappers, and we're going to get the tank housing put on. First, I am going to go ahead and take a razor blade and trim this case gasket off both sides. Just want to make sure you don't drop it down in the crankcase. Okay, just throw these little pieces away. Okay, there's the other piece. Okay, so we need four of these self-tappers. Like I said, P6 by 19, 4 of those. And then the M5 by 16. That's it. And the impulse line. That's part number for it for the OEM. Farmertec one's probably okay, but I know the Stihl rubber, Stihl quality, will last a good bit. And then we'll need the tank assembly. There's tank assembly. So there's 4 self-tapping screws. One's going to go in here, one's going to go in here, and on the other side, one here, and then right up here, I believe right here, somewhere right up in here, we'll take the regular M5 by 16. That's what will bolt into this upper anti-vibration mount. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to go ahead and put on is the impulse line. This tapered end is going to face towards the carburetor, and this end will just push right onto this brass barb fitting right here. So on the tapered end, I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit of the multi-lube just to help, but that tapered end is going to end up sliding right through that little hole below the intake boot right here. So that'll have to get poked in about the same time we push all this down on it. This multi-loop will just help this slide in through it. But that little shoulder on that impulse line, that's what will actually snap into that hole into this tank assembly. We'll get that pulled through. Okay, now we're ready to put the crankcase into the fuel housing. So the impulse line we need to feed, make sure it gets kind of poked up into the hole that it's supposed to go into. And all of this stuff, from everything I've seen, it's kind of a little bit of a pain for it all to press together, but it'll go. So right up here is going to go right into here on the front of the crankcase, and the rear, those will just snap in around. So let's see if we can get some of this to slide. Looks like it's kind of got to go all together at the same time. Okay, it's almost there. Okay, actually that wasn't that bad. You can see the self-tappers go inside all of these anti-vibration mounts. You can see the thread holes in each one of them. So we need to finish getting the impulse line kind of pulled into place. Somebody put grease all over it, so it makes it a little slick, but okay. I just felt it kind of click into place. So the next step is let's go ahead and make sure all our screw holes are lined up and get these self-tappers in here. And all of it, handy thing about most all this, everything so far has been a T27. I may have to get my little impact driver just to kind of get all this started because we're going to be cutting threads the whole time. We'll see. Yeah, that isn't really wanting to start. I'm not tightening it up all the way, but getting it run in, and the thread's got most of the way to it. Okay, the M5 by 16 will go right in here. Actually, I'll do a final tighten on everything. Once we get them all in, okay, looks like most of them are run down pretty close. Okay, these look like they get torqued to 6 Newton meters, and this one up here is 7 Newton meters. So let me get all this set. Okay, the wires here will go right through this little hole with the slit in it, is where they're going to poke through. And in the bag that the anti-vibration mounts and everything was, there's a little grommet. So that thing looks like. That grommet's going to press in place, like so. And then the wires, we got 2 different ones. I'll poke one at a time through there. Okay. Just moving that wire loom back. Okay, now these wires will end up getting poked around here, and these will be what gets hooked to the coil. So the fuel tank, it already has the hose and filter installed in it. So I'm going to leave those for now, and if they ever wear out or whatever, I've already got the OEM filter and fuel hose for that. Okay, and about the final step for the case here is we've got all these plugs, these little plastic plugs. Those will go in all these AV mounts. You get those put in, and then there's a heat shield piece of aluminum tape. Basically, we'll wipe this area off with some alcohol again and get that heat shield installed. So on these, again, this multi-lube is very handy. Just take a little bit of it, spread it around these AV mounts. That'll just help everything go together a lot quicker. Okay, there's a small one, a large one, and 2 medium-sized ones. So the small one will get pressed in here. Okay, those take a good bit of little force. Okay, there's those 2. Large one goes up here. Okay. So I've looked and I cannot find the heat shield tape and the Farmertec stuff anywhere. So in that gasket kit from OEM, it does come with one. So we'll just use Just use that one. This, we just want to get all the oil and grease off of it. This isopropyl alcohol is not going to hurt the paint at all, and it will flash dry off, but it'll clean the surface good enough to get this to stick. The only other thing we'll need is you can use a credit card or whatever, but I've got a little plastic squeegee that I use for putting on decals and things like that. We'll give that just a minute to dry. I've given that a couple minutes to dry. So this heat shield tape, it's going to end up getting bent up right around there. And then this little ledge up front will also get a little bend to it. But we'll use this corner right here to line up on this corner of the case, and it'll sit right in there. We'll get everything lined up and then start using the squeegee to push all the air out. And this little tab will get folded towards the back once it's up in there. So let's get this pulled off. This also, I know you probably can't tell, but the heat shield does have a OEM part number stamped into it right there across the bottom. But I really can't hardly make it out. Okay. Try not to touch the sticky stuff a whole lot if you can keep from it. Just try and touch the edges. So again, we'll line this corner up with here. That'll help get everything oriented the way it should be. And we'll get it all pressed in where it goes. Now you do want to watch this flap on this one side right here. The muffler bolt, one of them is going to end up mounting to that, so this we're not going to be able to do all the way. Actually, that just pulled right off of there, so that worked out good. Just put it down there. It's not going to hurt nothing. So I'm starting where the gasket, there's a little ridge right here where that case gasket pokes up just a little bit. I'm starting there and working my way to one side just to help get all the air out of it. And I'll get on the other side of it and push. Okay, so it fit in there fairly decent. Alright, next I'm going to just spend a few minutes and kind of reorganize my workspace and get everything kind of lined back out. So again, cylinder kit, that's the one I bought for a 56. Anyways, 56 millimeter cylinder kit. Hyway brand. It does come with it's like an Oregon spark plug, cylinder. It comes with Saber rings, which these are really good rings. It does come with a new base gasket and exhaust gasket. I'm actually kind of impressed with the packaging of this. Be more impressed if I could figure out how to open it. There we go. Okay, so we got both piston rings, or just the upper. Nope, both of them's in there. Two different packages. So same ring, top and bottom. Exhaust gasket and a base gasket. Base gasket is paper, like the Farmertec brand. The OEM base gasket is metal, and this kit comes with 2 different base gaskets, so I'm sure one's thicker than the other would be the difference. I'll get a mic and put on it and just see what the difference is exactly. Okay. Looks like this one is right at 17 thousandths. This one is about the same, maybe 1,000 less. No, it's right at 17 thousandths also. I don't know if you can make that out on the camera or not, so not sure why they included 2. I really figured one would have been thicker than the other. Well, they're both 17 thousandths. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and run the OEM base gasket, the metal one, and leave the paper ones. They'll just be extras, I guess, one day if I need them. So we got that. We've got the OEM circlips, which I'm just guessing the spring metal, the spring steel, and these are probably going to be a little better quality than the Farmertec, and these things are cheap. At the dealer, these things were $1.99 each. I looked on Amazon and on eBay, and they were $8 to $15 a piece, and I thought that was there's no way they should cost that much. Actually, most of the parts that I purchased, OEM parts, I did find cheaper at the dealer than I could find online, which I actually kind of thought was odd. So the cylinder, packaging on this Hyway stuff actually seems pretty decent. If you can see the transfers. Transfers are actually pretty clean on this thing. They're not, I was expecting some casting marks and stuff in here. Really doesn't look bad. Everything's kind of smooth. Okay. And the piston comes with its wrist pin, and there's the circlips that come with it. Yeah, I think OEM would probably be a little better on these. And wrist pin wise, let me show you the one that comes with the Hyway. I can get it out of the package. Almost like it's coated in cosmoline or something. Kind of sticky. So if you're going to run that wrist pin, probably need to take some alcohol or carb cleaner and wipe that thing down, get that stickiness off of it. And the OEM wrist pin, again, there's a part number for it. So there's the OEM wrist pin that we're going to use. Here's the Farmertec. You can see the difference in that. So I would guess to say the metal in the OEM wrist pin is probably a whole lot better quality. That's why they can get away with it being a lot thinner. Weight wise, they seem pretty close. I don't have a small scale or I would weigh them. Main thing is, make sure this one fits. It does. I am going to go ahead and wipe it off too and put a little oil on it or assembly lube on it. And again, there's a part number for the wrist pin bearing, the OEM one. Now, as far as the piston goes, all these pistons are going to have an arrow on them. That's going to point towards the exhaust. on all of them. And then right in here, I don't know if you can see that little pin. There's a pin there and a pin here. Your gap of your piston rings is going to go there, and there's a concave or an angle to the rings themselves. You're going to need to match that angle where, you know, the wider gap is away from the pin and the tighter gap's up close to the top. That way everything will seat right on that locator pin. I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. So next step is we're going to get ready to get the piston put on. So I'm going to go ahead and get the circlip put in on one side. It'll be this side. I'm going to go ahead and put it away from it. I'm going to put the retaining clip on the back side so I can press the wrist pin in through there. I say press, it's just going to be a push. None of this is a press fit. The windows on this piston actually do not seem that bad either. So, okay. Now, on the circlips, you're going to want to make sure you don't locate that gap in this little cutaway on either side. I'm going to aim to put that gap down here at the bottom or up at the top on the circlip. That little cutaway is so you can pull that circlip out at a later time. Put a little pick or tiny screwdriver in there and pop that circlip out for that. So just so I don't lose one of these and it go flying across the shop, because this item was not in stock, you're probably not going to be able to see that well. They do sell a special tool for this. I do not own one, so I'm just going to kind of do the old school way with a little screwdriver, maybe a tiny pair of pliers to get that to go in. I apologize if you're not going to be able to see much, but I'm going to put it in that little groove. There's a groove in that piston on both sides. That's where that retainer ring will go. So, I'm trying to keep my finger over this just in case if this does slip, this ring doesn't go flying across the shop, never to be found again. Okay. That one is in. Now, that's the easy one. The harder one's going to be once we have that thing on the case, but it is in there. Okay, now before I go any further, I'm going to go ahead and get these rings on. And these are going to be cast, so you just want to be careful. But if you can make it out, that's what I was trying to talk about a minute ago. There's a concaveness to the ring. The part that's going to be closest to each other will go down. The wider part will go up towards the pin. Maybe you can see that locator pin is. Just want to be easy around the skirt. You don't want to scratch it. I'm just applying a little outward pressure, sliding it down the skirt until I get it up in that groove. Okay. You can see how that one's in. And then the upper one. See, that pin's going to keep it from going where it shouldn't. We'll just make sure everything's close to being lined up when we put the compressor on it. The next step, I'm going to go ahead and wipe off this case one more time with isopropyl alcohol. I'm going to use the factory base gasket. I'll run it for now. But this bottom side, I'm going to go ahead and put a very thin coat of that Moto Lube, Moto Seal on it, just because there's two case halves down here, and if there's any imperfections down here where this gasket is or anything, I want to make sure that seals up. So let me get that clean and we'll get the gasket put on. Gasket's going to have to go in before the piston, otherwise the gasket does not fit over the piston. Okay, I'll give that just a minute to dry, and then that same Moto Seal we'll put on it. Okay. Now that isn't required to do, but okay, now that that's on, we will take our OEM wrist pin bearing, put some lube on it, just a little bit of that assembly lube, and coat this bearing with it. We just don't want any of this to be dry when we first start it. This assembly lube will stay in there a good bit. It's pretty thick and pretty tacky stuff. Wrist pin bearings in. Gasket's where it should be. Put a little bit more of this lube on the wrist pin. Coat it up real good. You can set this piston. Remember, air goes forward. Set this piston down over here and slide the wrist pin in through the piston and in through the bearing. Okay. The wrist pin's in there. Gasket's trying to flop around on us. So the next part's going to be probably one of the most difficult parts, unless you have the assembly tool. But getting the circlip in on that side. But I am going to go ahead and put some grease rags down, so just in case it does pop out, it doesn't fall down to the crankcase. And again, this probably won't get the best footage because I didn't order any spares. So I need to make sure I get this one in. Okay. That was a little bit of a booger. I think if I was going to do it again, I'd probably go ahead and just spend the money on the tool. But you just want to make sure that retainer goes in its little groove in there like it should. So that is together now. Now we're ready to get the cylinder put on. On the cylinder, kind of the same deal. I'm going to go ahead and wipe the inside of it out with acetone, but I'm not going to put the assembly lube on it. I'm going to put regular two-stroke oil, kind of coat that. I'll coat the skirt of the piston and the piston, the rings, just so nothing's dry when we go to first fire this thing up. Let's see. This is pretty clean. Let's see how dirty brand new cylinder is. Not awful, a little bit, but not bad. So the oil that I'm going to be running in the saw is a Schaefer's, this, or I've got some Honda HP2. But this is what I'm going to use to coat the inside of the cylinder with. No, it doesn't need just a bunch, but this is probably going to make it smoke pretty good also when we first fire it up, just because there's going to be a good bit of oil all in this thing, but that's okay. I'd rather it smoke a little than start up dry. Okay, all that is coated. Got a nice coat of that in it. We'll do the piston next. Get around the skirt real good, around the rings. And there's enough play that these rings are able to go past just because it's sprung out so much. So just want to make sure we keep them on the locator pins where they should be. We just don't want any of it dry. Before installing the cylinder, I bought a little kit, piston ring compressor, came with a piston stop, both of them did, plastic one and a metal one. So we'll want this. This is going to go right over the rod there, just to keep the piston from being able to pull all the way down in. And the ring compressor, looks like it's going to be that one. Just double checking the rings to those pins one more time. And we need to get the intake boot. Go ahead and put it on the cylinder with the clamp. The boot's pretty straightforward. There's a little tab on it that points down on it. This intake boot points up. We got it and the clamp. Go ahead and toss the clamp around there. Tighten up some of the slack out of it. And get it where it presses over here. Maybe I went a little much. Put that on here in a second. Okay, that's kind of indented with the casting, and it's stuck up on there all the way. Okay, now we'll put that clamp on. Okay, now the next step on this is going to be getting the cylinder set down on there, compressor rings, and then we're going to have to work this intake boot up into this hole once we get it that far. Okay, so the intake boot is on. Like I said, you want to point that down kind of with that casting mark so these indents are oriented in the correct position. Double check the piston rings, make sure they're kind of centered up where the locator pin is. Okay, we're going to put this compressor around, squeeze it to compress those rings. Then we'll take the cylinder and just straight, you don't want to mess around getting it cattywampus or twisting on it a whole lot. You just kind of want to push straight down on it. So we're going to need to probably locate the piston towards the upper end, just so the intake boot has a little bit of room, because once we get that down past the rings on the cylinder, we're going to start trying to worm this thing up through that intake hole. Okay. Simple as that. Slid right in. If you feel any binding or anything like that, you're going to want to stop. You don't want to break a piston ring. I did go ahead and put some of that 2-stroke oil on the inside of this just to help everything slide that much easier. So now that that's on, we can pull this out. Actually, I'm going to push it down just a little bit further. Okay. Now, we need to try to worm. Get the camera moved. Remove this. Now we're going to try to worm this intake boot in. I'm just going to kind of pull on this. There we go. Okay, that intake boot's got a little bit of a flap on it, so it'll just kind of flip up around this plastic housing. So the intake boot is in. Cylinder is in for the most part. So let's start getting the cylinder bolts put in. Cylinder bolts, that's the part number for them. I did go ahead and go with OEM on that. I don't know if that's really required or not, but I did. And everything I see online, everyone says that this front right-hand side bolt is always kind of the hardest one to get in on these. Sometimes they say there's not enough room with there's a fin there, and some people have to break that fin off, but I don't know if it's because I'm using the OEM bolt or if it's this brand of cylinder, but that one went in for me. So let's get all 4 of them kind of stuck up in there. Then I'll pick up on the cylinder just ever so slightly so I can look, make sure the gasket is kind of where it should be still. Oh, there went that one. Okay, I see it. I'll get a little pair of needle nose to get to it. Okay, now let's start over. I'm just starting these, I'm not running them in all the way. That'll just help kind of keep the gasket lined up where it should be. That might be the trick, just use a pair of needle nose to hold it, because there's not a lot of room down in all of this. To me, it looks like this is probably the worst one to get to. There's not a lot of room down in here. So let's see if I can just kind of grab the top of it and poke it down in where it should go. Okay, off camera I did pull each one of these cylinder bolts back out. I forgot to put some, a little bit of Loctite on each one of those threads. So now we're ready to torque these. And the torque for the cylinder head bolts, or the cylinder bolts. Cylinder bolts are, you can see, that's with the two different gaskets, which mine had the same, but millimeter and a half millimeter gasket. Both of them torqued to 15 Newton meters. So when you do these, you want to do an X pattern on it. I've already got my torque wrench set, so I'm just going to go a little bit on each one. Okay, now we'll take them to their final torque.